Thank you. Nice to cover. Tonight's interviewee is Wim. Wim, come up, give him a big hand of applause, please. Well done. So, Wim, come on, come sit down.
Thank you. Hello.
Okay. Wim is originally from Holland, so if we need subtitles, we'll have to sort of, well, just...
Go on the screen over there.
So, Wim, tell us a little bit about who you are and why there's a horrible humming noise.
I don't know why.
That's gone. Good, excellent. So, tell us a bit about who you are and what you do.
Okay. Currently, I'm a curate in a church nearby in Tunbridge Wells. And who say that first question again? Sorry.
Who are you?
Well,
This could be a long night.
I'm a person from Holland, as Rob says. I am married to my wife called Kirsty. She's originally from Crowborough, so she's from nearby. And I met her a long time ago in Africa, about 13 years ago. And that's how I came to England, so to say.
Okay, so tell us a bit about your childhood in Holland.
Well, I'm quite an unusual child in the sense that I'm not a child a lone child. I'm one of 12. So I've got 5 brothers and 6 sisters.
Anybody here one of 12?
I doubt it.
According to the rest of your family, no, unless you've got a hidden family somewhere. So, but anyway, carry on.
So a very, very large family. Sadly, both of my parents passed away. They died a few years ago. But all my siblings are all still alive. Most of them live in Holland, although I have one brother who occasionally lives in Germany and one sister who lives in Canada. So, very happy childhood. My dad had a very big house, which means that we all had our own room, which was very lucky for us to kind of have our own bedroom. And we had big parties at Christmas and at kind of Easter and whatever kind of Christian celebration it was really fun.
So were you brought up Christian?
I was.
Okay.
However, I wasn't Christian at all. I actually found that the Christianity that my parents were offering was really boring. I had to sit in church for quite a few hours, twice on a Sunday, in the morning and in the evening. And I think most of my brothers felt the same. And so actually, when I was a teenager, I really was pleased to actually not go to church that much. And actually, I wasn't a Christian at all. I did it to please my parents, because my parents were very devout Christians, very kind of serious. And so when I prayed, I was just kind of pretending, but really, I didn't really believe in a way they did.
So what changed? How did you sort of change from having this faith which really, it was pretty boring and it was just you pretending just to please your parents, to one that actually meant something to you?
Yeah. Well, it's the opposite to my wife. So my wife and I, we can't compare notes. She has the opposite. She became a Christian and wanted to come to church around this kind of your age. She went to CIRT, she went to this kind of event, and her parents were really kind of concerned that she went to church and she wanted to go to church. But what happened with me was that it took much later in life, when I was at the age of 21, that my cousin died with a kind of a terrible car accident. And actually, it's really relevant to the theme of tonight, what happens when we die. I genuinely was petrified that if I would die, that I would not be in the right place. And that was partly because I was very much aware of Christianity, so my parents taught me a lot about things. So I kind of believed it in the back of my mind, but didn't really want to, because I didn't find it very attractive. So I actually want to enjoy life as much as possible, and then just before I would die, I would say sorry to God, and hopefully we'll end up in heaven. That was kind of my deal with the Lord. And you realize that that's not really how it works, because sometimes you really don't know when you die. And I realized that when my cousin died in this car accident, what would happen to me? And I was worried. I was genuinely worried. And that actually started to change my kind of thinking of God and the life after this life.
Okay, so you then did lots of different bits and pieces, and including sort of, you in the army?
Well, I was in the Navy, yes.
You in the Navy?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yes, okay. How long were you there in the Navy for?
So what happens, I was in the Navy before I became a Christian, so I just came out of the Navy, that I had this kind of, this wake-up call. And And prior to that, I did a lot of different things. I was kind of a baker, and then I started to do kind of teacher training, so I became a teacher. And it was around that time that I really felt that God was calling me to do something differently. So I really came to a youth event where I was helping with some kind of you who are assisting here, kind of with the other youngsters, and I really felt God speaking to me on a youth camp in Romania. Now, I was not young as such, but I was one of those coordinators who were helping the team. And that's where it really changed. But also I really developed a heart for people who were living in a different situation than I, and particularly those who lived in poverty. And at the time, Romania was a country which was relatively poor. So I could see people who were really living very differently, had no shoes in the winter, and I just was staggering by it. And I felt, this is not right. So I had a real kind of sense of justice issue. And so whilst I was training to be a teacher, I soon went with an agency overseas. I really felt a call to go somewhere poor, and I ended up in Mozambique. And that's where I met Kirsty. And
Cool.
you were asking me about kind of the different type of jobs. So from being a teacher, I then started a water purification job. Now, you have to understand, my teacher training had to do with chemistry and with science, so it wasn't entirely alien to me to kind of develop something like sand filters, which was helping people to have clean water in those areas in Mozambique where there was really no clean water. And that's how I got kind of that job. And I learned on the job quite a lot of things, and developed a real heart for people living in poverty, but also just to kind of be good news to them rather than only speaking good news.
So you went to Mozambique and you developed that, and then you went off. I think you got married. You met Kirsty in Mozambique, yes?
I did,
and
yeah.
You got married
Here in this church.
In this church, it's the only wedding I've ever been to which was in 2 languages.
Yeah.
And then you went to Sudan.
I did,
And you went to Darfur. Tell us a little bit about what type of place you went to, what it was like, and why it was like that.
Well, Mozambique, first of all, was like what's behind me. Palm trees, beautiful, had a coast, had water. So there was poverty, but it was a peaceful country. There was no kind of war zone, so to say. And the reason we worked there was because of a natural disaster. There was so many people affected by floods because there was an incredibly heavy rainfall, rivers were saturated, and people just kind of were affected by the flood. Now, that wasn't the case when I went to the Sudan. What happened after I got married, we stayed in England for a while. I did a teaching job, and the same agency called us to, if we were available, to work for them in the Sudan. Now, at the time, Sudan was a bit like Iraq and Syria. It was a real hotspot, and it was very dangerous. It was a lot of fighting between Muslim groups and militias, and we felt called to help people who were affected by that, the people who were in real crisis, for example, women and children. And so we went in 2004 to Sudan and ended up in Darfur. Now, that's a country which had a real dryness, as in it's a desert. It doesn't have palm trees, it hardly has anything, but also a dryness from a spiritual point of view. People were searching for things, but there is really kind of a very oppressive regime. So people had to really submit to things, but hardly anyone who really believed in Jesus as I did, and my wife did. So we really felt called to be in an area where there was no physical support, there was hardly anything food to eat, hardly any water to drink, but also hardly anything to believe in. And so for us that was really very close to our heart. And so we went to an area which was very dark, so to say, very kind of dry and very difficult to come to, because not many people were allowed to get in.
So what was some of the hardest things about working with really displaced people in Darfur, a bunch of people who were driven from their homes?
I think first of all, the injustice. Because you have to understand that God wants what is right. God loves justice. And what happens there was so unjust. So many people were so negatively affected by what happened to them. They lost husbands, they lost wives, they lost children, they lost household, they lost people to live. And that actually is so unjust. That is all what goes against our humanity, of what we are created for. So that's the first thing. And secondly, to bring some form of hope. So how can you encourage someone who have lost so many of their family members by just giving good healthcare or clean water? Now, I think that is very limited. So you need a message of hope, so to say. So what for me was really hard to deal with such an injustice in a way that you could kind of provide something which was right for the people. So that's the hardest thing. Secondly, to be in a very oppressive country affects you. It affects anyone who lives there. It affects your health, it affects your mood, and I think that was really hard for us as well, to be in an area where you know the government is against you, the people who help you to travel from one place to the other place are against you, and that it is quite insecure, and it affects you as a team. If you are a good team together, your unity, because the country is not united. So actually that is probably the hardest thing. It's difficult to explain, but...
Yeah. So when you were in Darfur, did you ever feel like that you were in danger?
Well, I didn't feel that was really hard. I didn't mind to be shot and to be killed. I did mind to be very badly wounded and not knowing where to go. That sounds a bit strange, but you have to understand that prior to I was a Christian, I was very afraid to die. Once I became a Christian, I wasn't afraid really to die. I don't mind to die or the concept of death. It doesn't mean I'm afraid. When a lion comes around the corner, I will run as well. So that's something different. So that was not, but what I was afraid for, I was in charge of quite a large team of people who were doctors or people who were nurses, and they could be badly hurt as well. So yes, so I was worried about my team, that they were safe, because it's not very safe. You can get shot, you're in a conflict zone. So, but that was not so much the biggest worry. It was just kind of, how do you deal with that situation? Well, it's more a worry if the team you're working with is not together as a team, if you have minor conflicts, because then you cannot really operate as a team. And actually, that's what we experienced as well as a team, because we had an international team who were all Christians, and if they don't work really well together, I think that is quite hard to kind of do something really good.
So you were operating in a place where the risk of being shot was a reality. It could have happened at any time.
Yeah.
And it was dangerous for both you and your wife.
Yeah.
And the team.
And the team, yeah.
And so what was the biggest encouragement? What is it, because you look back and there's a lot of danger, a lot of difficulty. What was the most encouraging thing about working in a place which is so difficult, so hard, and so dangerous?
I think we managed to do a lot of good. So we helped approximately 200,000 people with water, with healthcare. So there's a lot of things you can do, and lives do get changed. So people do realize there's something more why you do it. So they will ask questions. And then slowly, we saw only a very few, really asking about God and asking about, well, what does it mean and why do you do this? And some of them through just a miracle. So there was a lady who was really ill. We helped her to go and find a doctor and a hospital, and she had to get out of Darfur, which meant that we arranged for her to be on an airplane to go to the capital in Khartoum, which was far away. So there's a long flight. And so she was with some other Christians we knew. They were from the south of the same country, South Sudan, and they prayed for her. And they prayed for a week. They fasted for a week, and they prayed for healing. And the reason they prayed, because they wanted her to encounter God, Jesus. And she was a Muslim, this lady. She was a very faithful Muslim. And so whilst they were praying and fasting for her, they prayed for this particular healing for her liver, I think it was, and her kidneys, because they were damaged and she needed to be operated on her. And just before she was to be operated, she experienced a healing because the two Christians prayed for her, and then she had to go to the hospital, and the doctors were flabbergasted. They were gobsmacked. They didn't know. They said, "There's nothing wrong with you, so you could be sent." Now, this is a very exciting thing, but also a very difficult thing, because he then comes home, gone out as a Muslim, comes back as a believer in Jesus, but doesn't know how to tell. And so so we had quite a few Christians who were secret believers, and they did not know how to tell this to their family, because if they would tell, they probably would be rejected or put into prison. And for me, this was a great encouragement to know that people become Christians. And in the meantime, this is the flip side of the question, a difficult issue, because I didn't want to bring them into danger. Now, you have to understand, this is a country where it's not allowed to proselytize or to evangelize or to tell the good news, which means that I had to be careful in what I was saying, whilst in the meantime to protecting the people who did become Christians. Nothing would happen to me. If I would say something about Jesus and God, then they think, well, you're a foreigner anyway. And the worst things would happen to me, they would kick me out of the country, but not with the people who believe there. So the people who are secret believers, they actually will get really badly persecuted. And I didn't want to be responsible for that. So that's an exciting part, to see people become Christians eventually, asking questions why we do things. In the meantime, a very hard thing.
Thank you, Wim. Now, we've this session, these 4 days, are based on a series of questions that we asked, and also people wrote down a series of other questions, and and these are deep, and these are some of the deep questions of life that I'm going to be asking you. Okay, so just so the first one is, and again, just whatever you think, is why is the banana bent?
I think it just looks better than a straight banana.
Excellent. That's a very good. I like that answer. So that's a very good. KFC or McDonald's?
I think McDonald's.
Okay, let's have a vote on that one. KFC. There was a few there. Okay, and McDonald's. McDonald's taken, I'm afraid. Okay. Do you like crackers?
I think they were absolutely mad. The first time I had a celebration in England was a Christmas celebration, and I didn't know what overcame, because I had never celebrated Christmas. For you, it's very normal to blow and to kind of have crackers and have crowns on your head, and that was absolutely mad to me. I thought that these very kind of reserved Englishmen suddenly all became children and started to have this big party. So really exciting. I like crackers. Yeah, they definitely have to be there over Christmas.
Excellent. And the final deep question, which is about life, is what does B&Q stand for? Yes, I think that as well. So
Better
I just
questions.
want to say, thank you so much. Give it up for Wim. If you want to know more about Wim, ask him afterwards.